December 4th at 7:32. Let the record show the entire board is present, along with our city assessor, Darius Gould, as well as Mark Rogers, who's the attorney for both of the items before us this evening. So our first order of business, since it's been a year, we need to reappoint our chair, vice chair, and secretary. So for the session we're just finishing up, I was the chair. I'm looking, Lucy, you were the secretary. Donald, you were the vice chair. If we want to leave everybody in place, we can do it all as one. If you want to do them one at a time, what's the board's pleasure?
Leave it.
Leave it.
Leave it? Yeah. All right, so then let's...
I move that we maintain the officers for the Board of Equalization into the 2025 year.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously.
Kevin, would you like, the newer ones may not know, this is Anthony Shiflett.
I think he prefers to be called Tony?
Yes.
That's right, you had a family emergency and couldn't be with us last year, so
Yes.
we're glad you are here this evening. Prior to the meeting, the applicant has expressed a desire to do HOSTA first.
Yes, sir.
Which is the larger packet. Who wants to go first? I'll let applicant.
I believe you go first, typically. So.
Floor is yours. If you'll introduce yourself for the record and who you're representing. And
My name is Daniel Grubb. I work at the law firm of Wilkes Artist Chartered in Washington, D.C. I'm a licensed Virginia attorney, and I represent the client, in this case, the owner of the property. Does anybody else introduce themselves? Or? Okay.
can if you want.
Yes, Darius Gould, City Assessor for Manassas Park.
I'm feedbacking my own voice here.
You said you had a booming voice.
We are withdrawing this appeal, and I'm not very happy about it, but something has happened that's forcing us to withdraw this appeal. For the past 3 years, we've been appealing this case based on the fact that the retail section could not lease. And since it was built in 14 years ago, it has not been able to lease 88% of its space. That was true on January 1st. That was true on the date of value on July 1st. In the past 2 months, they've leased a large portion of that property. Now, that's not supposed to be admissible evidence before this tribunal because it happened after the date of value.
Yeah, it's true.
But it is true. And the cat's out of the bag because they put it in their rebuttal package to our appeal. So how do you unhear that information?
Yeah.
It's impossible. Now, I'm not allowed to do such things because I'm a licensed attorney, and this, according to the Supreme Court, this board is as much of a tribunal as the circuit court, and I'm not allowed to introduce evidence that is not admissible. It's a bar violation. But it's impossible now to bring this appeal. So we withdraw the appeal.
Thank you. I would just say, I just ate over there.
Yeah, I think I would just generally say for those of us that have been around the city a while, even with it not being in here, what's going on over there is pretty widespread public knowledge. So I understand your point, but I would say, in general, we are grateful and thankful that the property is doing better.
No comment.
So am I.
All right. On to Park Station then.
Is this Manassas Yards?
Yeah, this is Manassas Yards, correct. So this is a garden apartment complex built in 2004, and the basis of our appeal is, essentially there's several. If you go to page 2 of our packet, I can sort of walk you through this. And hopefully yours is highlighted in yellow, or pro forma the way mine is, or those. So you'll look and you can see that they significantly overstated the actual other income at the property both in 2023 and 2022. They understated the vacancy and collection loss both in 2023 and 2022. And they understated the expenses based on the, when compared to the actual expenses after the property in 2023. And so the board is required to consider the actual income and expenses of a property when considering appeal, and the assessors clearly on these points either overestimated or underestimated the source of that. Now, the interesting thing about the appeal is their rebuttal. They concede that they got the other income wrong, and the vacancy and collection loss wrong, and the operating expenses wrong. They concede that they did that. But they also said, we got the potential rental income wrong. So they jacked up the potential rental income in order to come up with a value which they think, although it was lower than the assessment, they didn't think it was low enough to merit changing the assessment of the property. So here's my point first off. If the assessor is admitting that their income is wrong, their other income is wrong, their vacancy and collection loss is wrong, and their operating expenses are wrong on an assessment, we have met our burden of proof that the assessment is incorrect. So now the burden of proof shifts to them to prove that a new assessment they're creating, a revised assessment, is somehow the correct assessment before the board, that somehow this one is the correct one, which I submit would be an impossible thing to do. Because the only full year of financials, the most recent year of full financials, a full 1 year financials, are the 2023 financials, and they don't support that increase in potential rent income to almost $8 million. And the only possible document they could use to refute that would be a rent roll, which is simply a one-day snapshot of the potential rent of a property. And as the board probably knows, in multifamily properties, the rents change every single day. And most rental properties this site actually use a computer program to tell them on any single day what's the rent. And that's how they do that. I don't know that this client does that, but a lot of clients use that computer program that changes every day. So the only possible information they could have to establish their new rental income would be a one-day snapshot document. So they couldn't possibly meet their burden of proof. But even if the board wanted to consider that rent roll like that, it's important that the board understands that potential rental income is never a fact. It is always an opinion, because it's a guess of what this property would be pulling in if every single space was occupied. And that's never a fact. That's always going to be a guess, and it's always going to be anyone's guess. But that's what they did. They conceded that these other items were wrong, and they jacked up the potential rental income to approximately $8 million. They still came in with a lower value, but they said, well, it wasn't low enough to warrant changing the assessment. And so we're asking for the board to use, as the statute requires, to give consideration to the actual 2023 financials of this property to determine the value of this property of $82,571,220. And that's our case.
Darius?
Turn my microphone on. Okay. Excuse me. Just to begin, I guess, regarding the, state code he cited on, page 2 of his appeal, about considering the actual income and expense data. That's something I always do. I review the income and expense data that we have. I guess in this case, for the original assessment, we had the prior year, and then I guess with the appeal, we got more recent information regarding the operating history. I guess where we differ, I guess, in that, I guess their page 2, that 2023 column, I guess they're using, I guess, past information. And what I try to do, I guess, looking at the income and expense history, which I do look at that and consider what they've been achieving in past years, and then I try to project for the year one of their operating history, like looking forward, and that's what the cap rate is applied to. And that's appropriate with generally accepted appraisal practice. We always look at year one, like projecting based on the history, what the income expenses will be, and capitalize that value. So as you mentioned, I guess some of the adjustments I made, I guess you can see that on, I guess, like page 27 of the packet. I guess on there, page 27, I pretty much just kind of summarized some of the changes. And then on page 28, I guess you can see the differences from the 2024 assessment, the original direct cap information, and then what I revised it to with when I had more information, when I had the rent roll and updated operating history. And as you can see also with this property, since they had purchased it, they didn't have any 2021 data or just had partial year provided. So I guess originally I was looking at 2022, then I had 2022 and 2023 data to kind of, make some adjustments to our value. And just to point those out again, as you mentioned, I did increase the rents. I guess when we're doing revision, we're going to look at everything, not just the expenses or vacancy. I kind of looked at everything as a whole. So I guess looking at the rent roll and I guess the actual rents in place and kind of seeing the trends of rents increasing year to year. That's where my projection for the rents increased. I reduced other income as I had more information on those items, and I increased the expense ratio based on some more recent information. So you can see that in those two columns on page 28. I guess for more if you want more detail, pages I think it's 30 and 31. I guess it kind of has a breakdown more of the I guess the other income categories and in the changes I made. I guess beyond that, the page 29, I included some sales. This is not meant to be like a sales comparison approach. I just wanted to just include those just as general support for the kind of market value of the subject property in terms of price per unit. And lastly, again, I reviewed the operating statements provided by the owner. I made adjustments where I deemed appropriate. Those changes did result in a value that was less than my original assessment, but it was less than 1% difference. And in that case, I just considered the assessment to be, reasonable, I guess, for the property. And based on that, I just recommend keeping the original assessment for that value to be confirmed.
You could turn any assessment into anything you want if you do that. If you say, okay, well, I'm going to address every one of your points of appeal and mitigate that, and I'm just going to go to potential rental income and say, yeah, it's larger than that. It's just, what is it based on? No matter who does it, it's always going to be some kind of guess. So if you're going to go to the rent roll, yeah, it's the property owner's guess on any given day, but it's only good for that day. So I don't think that meets the burden of proof of simply salvaging your assessment by making a large increase from your original assessment of the potential income of the property just to salvage the assessment. But even if you did, we're talking about a difference in value of their revised to 87.4 from 88.3. Even those numbers would warrant a reduction in the assessment. Even their numbers, if you believe them. That's our case.
Darius, final comments before we start questions?
Just again, just wanted to note the rent projection was based on I guess actual rents that they had in place. It wasn't just on a projected rents for, well, it wasn't rents for like the vacant units, which may change day to day. I'm not sure if they're using that system as well, but I was just looking at the rent rolls of where the tenants were in place, and it's also the trends year to year of. I guess I don't have a lot of historic data. I guess with their property on the apartment rents increasing, but just based on the rent roll and the rents they had in place, it did support a higher rents for the different unit types.
Okay. Somebody want to go first, or?
Sure.
Go ahead,
I got a
Don.
bunch.
Daniel Grubb, is that what you're asking?
I'm sorry, Mr. Grubb, I just wanted to make sure I had your name
all right. It's
correct.
quite all right.
Because I realize you're not the person that's
Yeah.
on the front of the packet.
Mark Rogers is the head of the Virginia department, so he signs off on all the
Gotcha.
appeals that are filed.
Great. I just wanted to be respectful that I
No
was referring to
problem.
the
No problem.
right citation. So I was looking at the packet, and so I guess I would argue I live within walking distance of this property, okay, and I was hit with a 20-some% increase in my assessment, and your property, I say you, but your property actually received a reduction in assessment, which is not on trend with anybody else in the city. I mean, you already have a reduction, and when Darius did the review decision, there's another reduction off of that. But what year have you paid tax on the $95.5 million sales price of the property when your client bought it?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I believe that the sale price in 2021 was $95.5 million, I believe. Is that correct?
I mean, that could be right. It's such an old sale that it's not relevant to the market value.
It's on page 27 of the packet. It said recent sale price was $95.5 million. And so,
27 of my packet?
27 of our packet. I'm not
Okay.
sure, it's in Darius's
Well,
section.
that might
of
be
the-
my packet anyway. I just don't know what their numbering is. But I'll accept what you're saying is true, just for the
Yeah,
purpose of
I'm
not
just reading it
arguing
off the
about it.
page.
Okay.
So my question to you is that if we're using fair market value as the way to attain value for all properties in the city, and my neighbor sold for $341,000, well, that became my new assessment. I got hit with it all in 1 year. It was like a $60,000 increase all at one time, because my assessment was his sale price. So
Did you appeal that?
I did not.
Did you think it was wrong?
It was an actual sales price of an identical unit on my street, so I would at a fair market value.
So was that like a family resident, a single family home, or
It
what
was
is
a
it?
townhouse.
Okay, so it's a townhouse. Well,
So my point is, and that's why I'm asking you about the $95.5 million, is that your client bought this property for $95.5 million and has never had to pay tax or had their property valued at the sales price that they valued it at, and a bank or some other kind of financial firm assessed that the property was worth. So that's my question to you is why isn't the property worth what your client paid for it?
What was the year on the sale?
I believe it was 21.
21.
21. Well, I mean, usually if it's not within 3 years, it's not considered a recent sale. I mean, I don't know. It's the job of the board not to determine what the taxpayer paid in taxes in the years past, but what is the fair market value of the property as of July 1st, 2024.
Right.
And that's the only issue before the board.
And I will say to you is that, and this was probably established before the sale, in 2021, the property value was $69,595,900. The next year after that sale closed, it was identified as $86,641,000. And then last year it was $89,162,700. it's millions and millions and millions short of the actual sales price, and no year has your client ever had their property assessed at the sales price that they bought it at. Isn't that what we're supposed to use as fair market value?
Well,
If they're willing to pay that price for the property, shouldn't they also have that as their assessed value?
Well, it's up to the board's discretion if they want to use an old sale, but you're not supposed to, under the code. So if you look on page 4 of our packet, and this is a law directed to the Board of Equalization. Remember, this is a multifamily property. And on paragraph D, the valuation of residential rental apartments governed by this section shall be made by the board using the income approach, except when such real property has been sold since the previous assessment. Now, if this property had sold in 2023, or maybe even in 2020, well, it'd have to be 2023, then yeah, you could use the sale, but the board's been directed by the General Assembly not to do that because multifamily real estate changes so much year over year. So you've been charged by the General Assembly to not to do the very thing that you want to do. Say in years past, there was a sale back in 2021, and the fact that whether they pay taxes on it or not, the only issue before the board is what is the fair market value as of July 1st, 2024? So I mean, the line just seems irrelevant, and to use it would be contrary to the law directed to the board, that you're supposed to value this property based on the income that's coming in and the expenses that are going out.
And in a broader marketplace where assessments all over the city have risen in every category, and your property actually has declined. So why, without using the income model that we're using in this appeal process, your property lost $800,000 in value. And then in the second review, it lost another $900,000. That's $1.7 million lost in value, while almost no other property in the city has gone through a loss like that.
But the property hasn't gone through a loss. If you look at the financials and you look at
What I'm saying is the value you've lost that much value.
But that goes to the accuracy of their assessments. It doesn't go to the accuracy of our appeals. What we're saying is that in 2022, if you use the same cap rate they're using today, based on their financial performance, the property would have been valued at $80.5 million. In 2023, it would have jumped to $82.5 million. But, the accuracy of our financials isn't determined by the accuracy of their assessments.
How many years has this property? How many years in a row have they challenged their assessment?
I believe it was challenged last year, as I was here. I think it might have been the year before too, but I don't really remember.
I mean, this is my third round of the rodeo, and this is the third time that I believe that they've challenged.
So do they lose the right of appeal because they've appealed before? I don't understand.
No, I just making a comment that it seems like they're never happy with the assessment.
They're never happy with the assessment if it doesn't match what they're bringing in the door. I mean, that's why they're not happy with their assessment.
I mean, we'd all like to pay less tax, but we all have to pay our share based on the assessed value of the properties.
But the issue before the board is not whether they're paying their fair share of taxes. They are paying. They've already paid this tax bill. But the issue before the board is what is the fair market value of the property as of July 1st, 2024, based on the income approach to value? And we are showing you the income approach to value.
Good for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a naive little question.
Go for it.
I was a little confused because you kept, when you were talking about how many units are rented, you kept saying you only have a snapshot. Well, they've been in there for, any computer program can give you what's going on a day, can also tell you for the year.
Yes.
So they should know how much income they received for a year.
Well, we go by the calendar year. I mean, they go by the calendar year in their finances, so the last full year is 2023. Understand, we're starting to do our appeals back in the spring. So we're not, we don't even, our filing deadlines are even before the date of value in this jurisdiction. So our filing deadlines are going to be somewhere in the spring, and then your appeal to the board deadlines are going to be in August of, I believe this year it was August 1st. So, you know, they use the calendar basis. We don't ask them to change their financials, you know, for tax appeals. Because how would the board look at that? Well, we've got these special financials we prepared for the tax appeal. So we just ask them to reproduce the financials that they keep the way they keep them. But, I mean, it's an interesting point that you make, and I'd like to emphasize that, you know, what you get on a single day, especially when you're talking about a potential rental income guess, is not going to be what you're going to get after a full year. You're not. There's no way, you know, a full year is a full year. But again, you don't have to believe anything that I'm saying. If you even believed everything that they're putting in theirs, this assessment should be reduced. They're coming up with a lower number than what they had on their assessment.
Any questions? Tony, you have any questions?
What's the difference between in terms of the tax money between the original assessment and the new assessment?
I don't know. I didn't calculate that. I mean, the assessor may not.
$1.40
You-
and a half.
You say between the original and the revised assessment numbers that I have? Okay, let me look at that. Grab a calculator.
It's like $12,601.
Yeah. Between 10 and 15.
Yes, basically I have to, about 12,000.
That's between the 88 number and the 87
Yeah.
number. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Other questions, Tony, for the moment?
No, that's.
Okay. So Daniel, if I understand you correctly, your opening statement was around other income and total expenses, correct? That-
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes. That was from the original assessment.
Right.
But now the ball has moved on us now because they've come down on all those, or they've moved our direction in all those other categories and just increased the potential rental income.
Right. So I guess a comment and then a question. So as I look at other income and total expenses, on a relook by the assessor, it appears, and I should be reading this correct, that he's basically said, okay, what you've come back and said is you're not going to have as much other income and as much expenses.
Well, we're not going to have as much other income, we're going to be granted more operating expenses, and we're going to get more vacancy and collection loss, I think is how you would sum that up.
Right. So, now the contention is that on the relook, the rental income went up.
Sharply.
And so when I did calculations on that, it looked like from the original assessment, it was projected to be 0.5%, 0.004 of an increase in rental income
Yeah.
from one year to the next. But on the revision, that is now at a 4.1% increase. That's what I calculated out. Ironically, the rental housing inflation rate is 4.8%. So for me looking at that information, in the original assessment, given when it was done, it was pretty much flat for rental income. But on the relook, we've now, because we've opened this whole thing up, said, yeah, there is actually inflation on that rental rate and the rental income.
So I think my frustration with this is that we're constantly comparing assessment to assessment when I'm comparing assessment to the real numbers. So if you look on our numbers, our increase was much more significant. So in our potential rental income, it was at roughly $7.1 million. It went up to almost $7.7 million in 2023. So that increase is being tracked in the actuals. It's just not as high as they're saying it is.
Right, but you're asking us now on a relook that you've asked for to essentially ignore 2024 because you don't have that data yet. But we can, and if I'm understanding what Darius did, made some phone calls, figured out what the rentals were for those units, and did some calculations. And yes, I get there are, because years ago I used to rent, and if you timed it right and you rented for a year, you could get a free month, or they would reduce it because they were trying to fill units because people were moving. You're right, the numbers move. But the best we can do, absent data from the property owner, is to look at what we're being told. And that's the snapshot of the rentals, is my understanding. Did I get it correct?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that's wrong. I think it's within your discretion to do that. I just don't think it's very fair to judge a property based on one day of performance.
Well, just add a quick comment on that. I guess I just found my notes for the, I guess based on the rent roll, I basically took the average weighted rent for each unit type. So for one bedroom, it was $1,682.
Where are you?
Yeah.
It's not in the packet. This is just what I used to kind of project the rent. So basically, just took everything from the rent roll and kind of did an average weighted rent for each unit type. I guess I could have put it in the packet just for reference there. But it was $1,682 for one bedroom. I projected at $1,700, since assuming that rents would still be increasing on average throughout the year. For two bedroom, the average weighted rent was $2,005. I used $2,025 for the two bedroom units. And for three bedroom, the average weighted rent was $2,287, and for those I used $2,300 in my projections. So that's where the numbers increase, and I guess kind of the point with Kevin made. I guess when you would when we're projecting the income, I guess where he's looking at 2023 income and kind of using that for our assessment. It would be more like you were looking at it the year to year. So it went from 7.1 to almost 7.7. So you're projecting into the next year. It should be, continuing in that manner if rents are increasing. So I guess almost 8 million is kind of following that trend as well.
Okay, and since you're kind of talking, Darius, what was your thought process when you did your revision of how you came to the revised total expense number and other income number?
For other income, I guess it's a little tricky. I guess when you have 2 years to go by. So I guess for the reimbursement income, I guess kind of increased it. I guess it went from 390 to 411. So I was going slightly higher than that at 420. It may be higher or lower than that, but that's just kind of trying to project that on that trend. The Parking income, I just kept that pretty much flat with the other 2 years, kind of average with those. And then the other income, I guess there was kind of a wide gap between the 2 years. I was kind of generally roughly average between, I guess, those two values for 2022 and 2023 using the 285. So that's for the, I guess, other income categories. For the expenses, let's see, I guess it looks like they are just kind of more in line with 2023. You know, I guess they're, with only being 2 years there, there could be the argument that, maybe it could be higher just based on just the 2 years there went from 2,000 to 2.3 million. But I increased it to 28%. And I guess what I did with that as well, I guess kind of looking at some of the other apartments in the city, kind of seeing what their ratios were. So it's probably like on the higher end. I think the last property, I think I used a lower ratio. And try to keep those somewhat in line with each other until I have more information. Let's see. Yeah, apartment 170 used 26%. They used 28% on Pointed Palisades, 27% on Artina, and yeah, those are all the other kind of newer projects. So it's kind of roughly kind of being kind of in line with that and with their kind of recent year.
Darius, and again, I'm going back to, when you make your calculations, are you calculating it based on 100% occupancy of the units? Or when you do these calculations, is there like an industry standard for a unit this size, an apartment building this size? How many are unoccupied, or is there some kind of?
Well, I guess for the rental income, I guess it's considered potential rental income as if all the units are occupied, and then we make a deduction in the vacancy and collections to account for units that are
Okay, less
we assume to be
vacancy.
vacant.
Where is that?
It's page 30? I'm looking at page 30.
You're page 30. Where it says less vacancy and concessions, right before the effective gross income. So that's where we try to account for that.
Mr. Rowe, what is your vacancy rate? What is your actual vacancy rate?
The actual vacancy at the property was, at the end of 2023, was 7.5%.
And what is it? What is it now roughly?
Well, see, if it would be now, that would be several months after the date of value, so I don't know.
What was it on June of 2024? then?
I believe it was roughly the same, but remember, vacancy and collection loss includes collection loss, so you really don't know until you get the entire year's financial and what your collection loss is going to be. So it's kind of, if you just use vacancy, you're only getting part of the number. You've got to, you need to have a year of what did you collect, what did you have to write off as bad debt in the course of a year, and that plays into the vacancy and collection loss number. As far as what the assessor just said, I mean, that's correct. When you have your total potential rental income is an imaginary world where everything is leased, which almost never happens because there's always frictional vacancy in the market. But you do that for the purposes of determining what gets subtracted as vacancy. So you've got to subtract from a 100% occupancy number to get an effective gross income.
Are you arguing that the vacancy and concession rate is not appropriate because it's not 6%?
No, we're not. We didn't make that argument.
Okay.
There's only so much time to make so many arguments, and that looked like, well, I mean, it's not the actual, but it's not such an egregious error that it was worth pursuing. I mean, the big error in this case now, since, the old assessment has pretty much been tossed out the window, is that potential rental income number.
The the 7,999,200, that's the number?
Yeah, that's the number. That's essentially the gist of, that's the case what it is now. I mean, that's what the case is now. That's what the case has become. And we're always at a disadvantage when that happens. I understand why the assessors do that, but we file an appeal based on what the actual assessment is, and then we get a rebuttal after the filing date with a new number. And so, you know, all the stuff that we put into our packet to substantiate our appeal kind of goes out the window. And we don't get another chance to file something else. So we've got a new argument on our hands when we show up to the board.
I mean, just with kind of taking some of the information you've given and that he's given, you know, that you're saying that, you know, the gross revenue is, you know, it's not what it should be, but, you know, if I'm like shooting at a moving target, I mean, to get within $18 of a weighted average on the one bedroom and within $20 a month on the two bedroom, and within $13 a month on the three bedroom, I mean, I would say that's really close. I mean, that's less than 1% difference. I mean, you know, if you had to tell me, guess the rent, I probably wouldn't get it that close.
Well,
You know. so
that's
I
a
mean-
good point, although I would obviously look at it another way. If we've already thrown out the actual fiscal year 2025 assessment because we're saying it's wrong, then we changed all the numbers, you have to ask yourself, okay, if the original assessment was wrong, what makes the rewrite right? You know, you're asking yourself, you know, what makes the redo correct? Because if they would have just addressed the points in the appeal and moved in our direction, we probably would have settled the case.
I mean, would you have filed this case if they had given you the 87,478,000? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they have an inflated income in that price. So I don't want to give away my litigation strategy on what I would or wouldn't have done,
I'm
but
just saying is that I think part of your argument seemed to me was is they made a mistake, he corrected it, but didn't give you the lower assessment.
correct.
Okay.
So, yeah, so what I'm saying is, it's not, I mean, that offer wasn't made to us. I mean, essentially it was, we're close enough. We're close enough, so it doesn't matter that we're coming in at a lower number. $12,000 isn't anything, so.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, you know, in theory, if this board were to adopt that number, you still wouldn't be happy with it, even though it's reduced from the last year's assessment and it's reduced from the first assessment as a
I would be
look back.
happier than getting nothing.
I'm being theoretical, that, you know.
Other questions? You good, Tony?
Good.
Good. Good.
Okay.
All right, if there are no other questions, discussion amongst the board, what do you want to do?
Can I make just a
Sure.
comment?
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
to the person who's Mr. Grubb, is to, in the future, please, if you're doing another appeal, please make the certain pages bigger. It's really hard to read.
Duly noted, and
I
I
mean,
will.
and I wear glasses, but it's very, very
And
difficult.
I don't mean to throw our staff under the bus, but when I'm reading the final version of the packet, it's on a computer screen in electronic form, so like, well, wow, this is easy to read. But yeah, when it gets printed
I mean,
out,
I couldn't really read. I had to take your total numbers as what they were because I couldn't really get down into all these numbers because they're so small. and-
I'll talk to the staff about that. Like I said, I don't actually see the printed version of this until I'm preparing to walk out the door and come here to make the argument, so I will.
That
That's a
was meant
good
as
point.
positive feedback.
Yeah, thank you for that. I will talk to our staff about
I
that.
have documents like this for a living, and I'm sensitive to this all the time, because the government comes back to us and says, we can't read this, you know, we got to file.
I'll
Yeah.
work to improve that.
Yeah, I, quite honestly, I suspect since most everything was in a portrait mode in that particular section, they just printed and it came out that way versus turning them, but. All right, thoughts, discussion? Got choices.
think we go with, the 87.4,
That's
Darius's assessment, the revised
the
assessment?
revised assessment?
Yeah,
What page is that?
30. Darius's.
Yeah,
In Darius.
It also shows up on 28 in the final column.
Oh,
But yeah, it's easier to read that
Yeah,
way
that's what I'm
as a
reading.
single.
28, yeah. I guess my earlier point is that the property has never been assessed at their own sale price.
But you can't take that, unfortunately.
Right, I'm just saying I'm taxed on somebody else's actual sales price. I mean, that's how, as residential, that's how we're assessed at. I had to take that assessment and I didn't appeal it because I didn't realize it was based on a real sale of an identical unit. It is the 88,303,700 is a decline from the previous year. I'd be interested to know how many properties in the city declined assessment-wise.
Even of like property.
Yeah, I don't, is that a question I can ask? Can I ask him since he's still here, or can we not ask
I
him?
I think we just need to consider this one,
This information.
one case.
Okay. There are, the current assessment of 88,303,700 is already a decline from the previous assessment, without a decrease in rent, which is what the petitioner has asked us, is to use the income of the property, but the income of the property has increased. Is that correct?
By what you can look at from a national average, and I've got to believe in DC, we're probably above it, but the national average for rental housing inflation in 2024 was 4.8%, and the revised number is 4.1%.
The 7,999.
The 799,200 is a 4.1% from 2023.
So it's pretty close. That's pretty close.
Well, and probably a little under, but,
Yeah.
you know.
Lucy, do you think that, as you were saying, do you think that the assessment, the income supports the 87,478,002?
I think so. The rental income and the losses, and if you calculate it all, I think so. I don't think I wouldn't go with their calculations, but I think Darius's calculations are more accurate, yes.
So I think for me personally, what I'm trying to work through is if we don't like the 2024 assessment and we want it redone, I'm kind of hard pressed to open it up and only do it piecemeal and say, well, I didn't like this number and this number, fix those, but please don't do anything else. I think we continually have to do things holistically. And so in my mind, I think it's either we leave the assessment as it was or the revised and not try to piecemeal them. That's kind of where my thought process is.
Mhm.
Does the revised number take into account only information up through June 30th, 2024?
It would be a Darius question. The OCA revised number, your page 30, does that only take into account information through June 30?
Yes, it would actually probably be, well, probably a little before then, but it was, within the, that time period.
Okay.
Before that date.
Before the July 1st, 2024 date.
Mhm.
I just didn't want to consider information that
Information
was
after.
afterwards, yeah.
Good question. All right.
I can support the 88.3, and I can also, and I could support the 87.5, or whatever it is. I
87.
can support either
You're
one.
on the 87.
Mhm.
Hmm?
What do you think, Lori?
hold it, which,
So it's easier to look at it on page 28.
okay, I'm on 28, just,
Yeah. So So this is revised, which would be the 87.
Okay.
This is the original. So I think Lucy is saying here, Donald is saying he could do either.
Does the change in the tax rate, because it did
No.
come down, would it change the final number?
No, this is just
Assessment,
valuation.
right.
This is assessment, not
Nothing to do
tax
with money.
bill.
Well, no, but they're using a cap rate that includes the tax rate in it. Would that change any of the numbers? Because it
It's
would,
it's effective July 1. Can't take it into account.
right. Right.
Tony, thoughts from you?
I would tend to want to stick with the original assessment, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Just because of all the facts that you guys have laid out, related to the fact that, it has gone down.
All right. Somebody want to put a motion on the floor?
I just want to make sure I understand this. This is Darius's, right?
This is revised, yes, this is Darius.
This is Darius revised.
Yep.
This is Darius's original?
That's the original.
Go with that. Doesn't it make more sense?
No, you're really looking at this number here
Okay.
versus here's what it was in '23. So Donald's point is this is already a decline. This is a bigger.
It went down.
Yep.
You can take either way.
Well, somebody put a motion on the floor and let's see where it goes.
Okay.
I move that we uphold the original assessment.
I have a motion by Donald to uphold the original assessment. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Tony. I'm going to do a roll call.
What was the figure that you,
It's 88,303,743. The original 2024 assessment.
All right, so we'll do a roll call. Donald?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Marie?
Skip it until I hear from everybody else.
For Lucy?
No.
It's a no.
I'm kind of conflicted.
I'm going to vote yes.
did you say no?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need a quorum?
We have quorum.
But you have to choose.
You have to vote, or you can technically abstain if you want to abstain.
I'll go with the 2024. So is that a yes or no?
That's a yes.
That's a
Because
yes.
that's the motion.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So the motion carries with a vote of 4-1 to uphold the original 2024 assessment at a value of $88,303,743.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I don't believe there is,
rounded on that sheet was 700, the actual assessment.
Say it again.
Just rounded on the actual assessment. I guess on that sheet it has like the actual.
Oh.
numbers, but
Oh,
assessment around
gotcha.
it. But just for clarity.
I think he was also a lot less angry than when he came
no,
in.
hang on, let's finish up.
Hang on.
So 88,303,
Yeah.
well, 7,
743.
700 rounded.
Is that the actual assessment that they received?
okay, that's what I wanted to make sure is we had the actual assessment number in the
Sorry
record.
about that. Yeah, I just read the number that you had.
It was on that page too, so.
Okay.
Rounded like.
If we're off by pennies, the intent is to uphold the original assessment, so that was the intent of the motion. I don't believe there's any other business to come before the board, so with that, we will adjourn. I will wish everybody happy holidays, safe travels if you are going to see loved ones. If you're hosting, good luck. Thank you all for your service.
I have a question because it confused me when he kept using